Art 1, the last passenger on a dark and stormy night. Alex, a young freelance journalist, was driving his old, rattling sedan through the back roads of rural Pennsylvania. The night was oppressively dark, the kind where the dense tree canopy seemed to swallow any light, leaving the world outside the car's beams unnaturally still. Alex, an enthusiast of the bizarre and unexplained, was on his way back from investigating an old ghost town, his mind buzzing with stories and secrets unearthed from the desolate place. The rain pounded against the windshield, and the wipers fought valiantly but barely kept up. Alex's eyes were fixed on the road, partially out of necessity and partially to avoid glancing at the ominous woods lining the highway. The radio crackled, the signal lost in this secluded area, leaving only static to keep him company. As he rounded a particularly sharp bend, his headlights caught a figure, a shadowy outline of someone standing by the roadside, thumb outstretched. Despite his better judgment and the late hour, something compelled Alex to slow down. As a storyteller, he couldn't resist a potential tale or the mystery of a lone hitchhiker on such a forbidding night. The figure stepped into the light, revealing a young woman, soaked to the bone, clutching a small, battered suitcase. Her eyes were wide, fearful yet hopeful. Alex unlocked the passenger door, and she hurried inside, escaping the downpour. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. "I'm Clara." Alex nodded. "Where to?" His voice was calm, but his mind raced with questions. "Just down the road, there's an old inn." I'm meeting someone there." As they drove, Clara seemed to relax, her initial tension easing as the car's heater fought off the chill of the night. Alex tried to make small talk, asking about her journey, but Clara was evasive, her answers vague and her gaze often drifting back to the stormy darkness outside. The inn, when it finally came into view, looked like something straight out of a Gothic novel, a large, dilapidated Victorian building, its windows dark, the paint peeling like the building itself was trying to shed its aged skin. Alex's curiosity flared. Why here? Why now? Clara thanked him again as she got out, her suitcase in hand, disappearing into the inn without looking back. Alex's journalist instincts wouldn't let him drive away just yet. Parking his car, he watched the inn from a distance, the silhouette of Clara visible briefly behind a curtain before the light snapped off. Driven by an inexplicable urge, Alex decided to check into the inn himself. The lobby was empty except for an elderly clerk who looked as though he was part of the antique furniture. With a creaky voice, the clerk handed Alex a key to a room on the second floor. As Alex ascended the staircase, the old wood moaned under his weight. The corridor was lined with portraits, their eyes seemingly following his every move. His room, when he entered, was cold and musty, the air thick with the scent of decay. He tried the lights, they flickered weakly before giving a resigned buzz. The only illumination came from the frequent lightning flashes that cast ghostly shadows against the walls. Unable to sleep, Alex's thoughts returned to Clara. Something about her, and this place, felt off. He decided to explore, his journalistic need for answers pushing him out into the hallway. The inn was quiet, save for the storm outside and the occasional groan of the aging structure. Alex moved stealthily, his ears straining for any sound. As he passed one of the rooms, he heard a whisper, faint but distinct. Pausing, he pressed his ear against the door. "Please let me go," a voice pleaded, tremulous and barely audible. Heart racing, Alex tested the handle. Locked. He considered his options, then headed downstairs to confront the clerk. But the lobby was now empty, the clerk vanished. The only sign of life was a flickering light from behind the reception desk. Venturing behind the counter, Alex discovered a set of old brass keys hanging on a dusty board. Armed with these, he returned to the door, unlocking it with a trembling hand. Inside, he found a room not unlike his own, but in the corner, bound and gagged, was Clara. Her eyes, wide with terror, turned to him as he rushed to untie her. "They're coming," she whispered urgently. "We have to leave now." Before Alex could ask who they were, footsteps thundered up the staircase, multiple heavy sets converging on their location. Grabbing Clara's hand, Alex pulled her from the room, racing down the hallway as the footsteps grew louder, closer. Part 2, Shadows of the Past. Alex and Clara dashed through the dark corridors, their breaths echoing sharply against the cold, damp walls. The inn seemed to come alive with their panic, the portraits on the walls glaring down at them with silent accusation. The thunderstorm outside raged with increasing ferocity, lightning intermittently illuminating their path with ghostly flashes. Turning a corner, they stumbled upon a narrow staircase leading to the attic. Without hesitation, they ascended, the old wood creaking ominously under their weight. At the top, they found themselves in a musty, cobweb-laden room filled with old furniture covered in dusty sheets and forgotten memories. Clara pulled Alex behind a large armoire as the footsteps approached the attic door. The door creaked open, and heavy steps thudded onto the attic floor. Through a crack in the armoire, Alex could see several figures entering the room, their features obscured by the darkness. They spoke in hushed, urgent tones, a language unfamiliar yet oddly menacing. The figures split up, their flashlights slicing through the darkness, casting long, sinister shadows. Alex's heart pounded in his chest, his mind racing for an escape plan. Clara gripped his hand tightly, her body trembling. As the figures drew nearer, Alex noticed an old, rusty vent cover on the wall near them. Whispering to Clara, they slowly moved towards it, carefully avoiding any sudden noises. With great effort, they pried the vent open and squeezed inside, pulling the cover back in place just as one of the figures approached their hiding spot. Inside the vent, they crawled through the narrow, dusty space, the sound of their pursuers muffled by the metal walls. They moved as quietly as possible, aware that any sound could betray their location. The vent led them away from the attic, down through the walls of the inn, and eventually opened into the basement. The basement was a vast, dark space filled with shadows and the musty smell of decay. Old furniture, broken and forgotten, lay scattered around, and the air was cold and damp. They could hear the rain pounding against the small basement windows, the storm still in full force outside. As they moved through the darkness, Clara stumbled over a loose floorboard and let out a small cry. Instantly, a light turned on at the far end of the basement, and they froze. A figure stood there, silhouetted against the dim light, holding a lantern. It was the old clerk, his eyes gleaming unnaturally in the dim light. "You shouldn't be down here," he rasped, his voice echoing strangely in the large space. "We need to leave," Alex said, his voice firm despite his fear. "What's happening here? Who are those people?" The old man chuckled, a sound that sent chills down Alex's spine. "You stumbled into something old, something dark. This inn has secrets, buried deep." He began to move towards them, his steps slow and deliberate. Alex and Clara backed away, looking for another way out. Behind them, they found a small window, barred but old and rusty. As the old man advanced, they worked together, pulling at the bars. With a loud crack, one bar gave way, then another. Just as the old man was nearly upon them, they managed to break free and squeezed through the window, dropping into the muddy ground outside. The rain soaked them instantly, but they didn't stop to catch their breath. They ran, the inn looming behind them like a monstrous shadow. They headed into the woods, the trees whipping past them as the wind howled. The woods were dense and disorienting, the darkness complete, but for the occasional lightning strike that illuminated the gnarled trees. They could hear sounds behind them, footsteps, voices, the relentless pursuit of their mysterious enemies. As they pushed deeper into the forest, the terrain became rougher, the undergrowth thicker. Suddenly, Clara tripped over a root and fell, her ankle twisting painfully. Alex helped her up, but she could barely put weight on her foot. "We can't stop," Alex said, his voice urgent. "We need to keep moving." But as he helped Clara to her feet, They heard a low, growling sound from ahead. Frozen, they watched as two glowing eyes appeared in the darkness, followed by another set, and another. The forest around them seemed to awaken, and the realization dawned on them that they had fled one nightmare only to run into another. As the glowing eyes drew closer, Alex and Clara backed up slowly, their hearts pounding. The growls grew louder, the eyes multiplied, and they knew they were surrounded. The storm above them seemed to pause, the world holding its breath. Part 3, The Forest Whispers. Alex and Clara stood back to back, the eerie eyes encircling them in the dark, dense forest. The growling intensified, a primal sound that seemed to shake the very ground. The storm resumed its furious symphony, rain pelting down on them, mingling with their fierce sweat. Clara clutched Alex's arm, her breath short and panicked. "What are they?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know, but we can't stay here," Alex replied, trying to keep his voice steady. He scanned the darkness for any break in the circle of glowing eyes. Suddenly, a flash of lightning illuminated the forest, revealing not beasts, but large, hulking figures, shrouded in tattered cloaks, their faces obscured by hood-like protrusions. The sight was horrifying yet oddly human. Using the brief moment provided by the lightning, Alex pulled Clara forward, heading towards a slight gap he had spotted between two of the figures. They ran, the figures growling and moving to intercept them. Branches snagged at their clothes, thorns scratched their skin, but fear propelled them forward, deeper into the uncharted darkness of the forest. After a heart-pounding sprint, they stumbled into a small clearing. The figures seemed to hesitate at the edge, their eerie eyes watching, waiting. In the center of the clearing stood an old, gnarled tree, its branches twisting skyward like writhing snakes. The tree seemed ancient, a silent sentinel in the tumultuous night. Its trunk was hollow, an opening that seemed to beckon them for shelter. With no other options, Alex and Clara approached the tree, the figure's growls a constant reminder of the danger at their backs. They squeezed into the hollow, the wood cool and slightly damp against their skin. Inside, the sounds of the storm were muffled, replaced by the heavy breathing of their own frightened breaths. Clara leaned against Alex, her ankle throbbing painfully. "What are those things? Why are they chasing us?" she asked, her voice a mix of fear and frustration. "I don't know, but it seems they don't want us to leave," Alex replied, peering out of the hollow. "Or maybe they're guarding something." They sat in silence, listening to the rhythmic growling outside. Time seemed to stretch into eternity, each minute a test of their resolve. As the night deepened, a strange feeling began to envelop Alex, a sense of age, of ancient secrets hidden in the very soil they rested upon. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft, melodic voice, almost imperceptible over the growling. It seemed to come from the tree itself, whispering words in a language he couldn't understand. The voice was soothing, yet carried an underlying note of sadness and longing. Clara heard it too. "Do you hear that?" she whispered, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and wonder. "Yeah, I hear it. It's coming from the tree," Alex said, his curiosity piqued despite the danger. He placed his hand against the inside of the trunk, feeling the rough bark. The voice grew slightly louder, more insistent. As they listened, the voice began to form words they could understand, speaking in a heavy, accented English. "Seekers of truth, bearers of light, why do you flee from the guardians of night?" Alex was stunned. We didn't know. "We're just trying to escape," he responded, unsure if he was truly communicating with the tree, or if fear had driven him to madness. "The forest keeps its secrets, and the night its mysteries. What is sought must be respected, and the past left to slumber," the voice intoned, a note of warning threading through its words. Outside, the growling had ceased. Alex cautiously peeked out of the hollow. The figures had retreated, forming a distant circle around the clearing, their eyes still fixed on them, but no longer advancing. "Are they protecting this tree?" Clara asked, her curiosity overcoming her fear. Maybe, Alex replied, or maybe it's not the tree, but what it represents or guards. They sat back, the tree continuing to whisper its cryptic messages. As dawn approached, the figures slowly dissipated into the forest, their eyes the last to vanish, leaving Alex and Clara alone in the clearing with the ancient tree. With daylight, the forest seemed less menacing, its secrets veiled in morning mist. They knew they needed to leave, to get back to civilization and safety. Yet, the voice of the tree lingered in their minds, a siren song of forgotten lore and hidden truths. As they stepped out of the hollow, Alex looked back at the gnarled sentinel. "We will return," he promised, a new story unfolding in his mind, one of ancient guardians, hidden secrets, and the eternal dance of light and darkness. Part 4, The Woven Web After leaving the sanctuary of the gnarled tree, Alex and Clara found themselves weaving through the forest with a cautious pace, the daylight revealing paths that were concealed in the night's embrace. The forest, with its towering trees and underbrush thick with dew, felt like a labyrinth designed to both shield and confine secrets. Clara's ankle throbbed with each step, a constant reminder of their vulnerable state. Alex supported her as much as possible, his mind racing with plans and contingencies. He couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was watching them, its ancient occupants whispering among the rustling leaves. They stumbled upon a narrow, overgrown path, barely visible under the tangled vines. The path seemed to beckon them deeper into the woods, and despite their trepidation, they followed, drawn by an inexplicable pull. As they advanced, the air grew colder, a chill that seeped into their bones, more psychological than physical. Without warning, a dense fog rolled in, wrapping the forest in a thick, white veil. Visibility dropped to a few feet, and the path became even more treacherous. The fog seemed alive, swirling around them, caressing their skin with its cold fingers. "Alex, do you feel that?" Clara asked, her voice low, almost lost in the fog. "It's like the fog is alive," Alex replied, his instincts on high alert. He felt eyes on them, watching, calculating. The fog thickened, and they heard soft, whispering voices, as if the mist itself was speaking. The whispers were indecipherable, a language of sighs and murmurs. Then, without any discernible source, shadows began to flit through the fog, dark shapes, swift and silent, circling them like predators. Clara clung to Alex, her fear palpable. They continued, their steps hesitant but determined. As they moved, the path began to descend, the terrain sloping downwards into what felt like a hollow. The air grew even colder, a sign that they were heading into the heart of something ancient and hidden. The path ended abruptly at the edge of a dark, still pond. The water was like glass, reflecting the foggy shroud above. The whispers grew louder here, echoing across the water. On the far side of the pond, partially obscured by the mist, stood an old stone structure, its purpose long forgotten, covered in moss and ivy. Alex and Clara circled the pond, their movements slow, the ground slippery with moss. The stone structure revealed itself to be an old well, its mouth open and inviting. Beside the well, carved into a stone, was a series of runes, their meanings lost to time but their intent eerily palpable. The whispers seemed to emanate from the well, a chorus of voices pleading, warning, beckoning. Alex approached it, drawn by a journalist's curiosity and a deeper, more primal need to understand. He peered into the darkness below, the blackness seeming to stare back at him. "Alex, don't," Clara warned, her voice tinged with a fear that transcended their current predicament. "There's something wrong with this place." But Alex was compelled, the voices in the well whispering secrets meant only for him. As he listened, the voices began to form coherent words, speaking directly into his soul. "The guardian awakens, the cycle renews, the lost shall be found." Suddenly, a gust of wind swept across the pond, dispersing the fog momentarily. In that clear second, a figure appeared on the other side of the pond, a tall, cloaked figure watching them intently. The figure raised a hand, pointing directly at them, then vanished as the fog rolled back in, thicker than before. Alex stepped back from the well, shaken by the encounter. "We need to leave," he said, his voice hoarse with fear. They turned to retrace their steps, but the path was gone, swallowed by the fog. They were lost, the forest claiming them as its own. With no other choice, they walked blindly, the cold mist enveloping them, the whispers of the well echoing in their minds. As night began to fall, the forest transformed. The trees seemed to lean closer, their branches intertwining to form a barrier, guiding and trapping. The fog lifted slightly, replaced by a darkness so profound it seemed tangible. In this oppressive night, they heard a new sound, an irregular, thumping beat, like a heart pulsing through the forest floor. The ground beneath their feet vibrated with this heartbeat, syncing with their own fears. They continued, driven by desperation, when suddenly, a light appeared through the trees. A small, flickering light, like that of a candle. With no better direction, they headed towards it, each step cautious, the forest's heartbeat loud in their ears. The light emanated from a small, Decre *** Part 5, the cabin of Whispers ***. The light emanated from a small, decrepit cabin, its wooden structure warped by time and neglect. The door hung loosely on its hinges, creaking softly with every gust of wind that managed to permeate the dense fog. Alex and Clara approached with trepidation, their bodies tensed for any sudden movements or sounds apart from their own cautious footsteps. As they reached the threshold, the door creaked open further, as if inviting them in or warning them away. Inside, the cabin was dimly lit by a single, flickering candle on a dusty table. The air was thick with the smell of old wood and something faintly metallic, like blood long since dried. "Should we go in?" Clara whispered, her voice trembling not just from the cold. Alex, driven by a mix of desperation and the innate curiosity that plagued all journalists, nodded. "We might find something to help us understand what's happening, or at least get some shelter for the night." Stepping inside, they noticed the walls were lined with old, tattered books and strange artifacts that looked like they belonged in a museum of the occult rather than a forgotten cabin in the woods. The floorboards groaned under their weight, a somber echo to their every move. In the far corner of the cabin, there was a small fireplace, long unused, filled with ash and charred remnants of wood. Above the fireplace, a large, unframed mirror leaned against the wall, its surface dusty but intact. Alex was drawn to it, his reflection gazing back at him through the haze of dust and dim candlelight. As he stared into the mirror, the air around him seemed to grow colder, and the faint whispers they had been hearing since entering the forest grew louder, now discernible as pleading, mournful voices. Clara, noticing the change, grabbed Alex's arm, pulling him back. "We shouldn't stay here," she insisted, her eyes wide with fear. But before they could turn to leave, the candle flickered violently, casting erratic shadows across the cabin. The door slammed shut with a force that shook the walls, plunging them into near darkness, the only light now emanating from the strange, ghostly glow reflecting off the mirror. "Alex, look." Clara pointed towards the mirror, her voice a mix of horror and fascination. The reflection showed not their own images but a series of shifting scenes, a dark forest under a moonlit sky, shadowy figures with glowing eyes surrounding the cabin, and deeper, older memories of the land upon which they stood, tainted with rituals and forgotten bloodshed. "We're seeing its memories," Alex murmured, understanding dawning on him. "The mirror shows us the history of this place." They watched, unable to tear their eyes away as the scenes shifted faster, showing the construction of the cabin, the various inhabitants over the years, each adding to the story of this haunted place. And then, the visions grew darker, depicting rituals of a forgotten cult, their practices grim and tied to the supernatural guardians they had encountered in the forest. The whispering grew louder, almost as if the voices were in the room with them, narrating the horrors shown in the mirror. Bound by blood, sealed by time, the guardians awake to protect the divine. Suddenly, the visions in the mirror stopped, snapping back to their reflections. But they were not alone in the reflection now. Behind them stood the cloaked figures, their eyes glowing faintly in the mirror's surface, though when they turned to look behind them, nothing was there. Clara gripped Alex's hand tightly, her nails digging into his skin. "What do they want from us?" she whispered. "Protection," Alex replied, realization slowly dawning on him. "Or maybe a sacrifice." The cabin felt increasingly oppressive, the air thick and heavy, as if it were difficult to breathe. They needed to leave, to escape, but as they turned towards the door, they found it immovable, sealed shut as if by some unseen force. Determined not to succumb to the growing dread, Alex searched the cabin for another exit, a window or a back door, but found none. The only way out seemed to be through what they faced within the cabin's walls. As they pondered their next move, the ground beneath the cabin began to tremble, a low rumble that grew into a roar. The books and artifacts rattled, some falling from their shelves. The candle flickered out, plunging them into darkness, and the temperature dropped, a chilling cold that seeped into their bones. In the darkness, the whispering voices crescendoed into a cacophony, surrounding them, overlapping in urgent, pleading tones. The cabin itself seemed to be coming alive, the walls groaning with ancient strain, the mirror vibrating against the wall as if about to shatter. Clara and Alex huddled together in the center of Part 6, the unraveling in the pitch black of the cabin, with the world outside and inside merging into a singular entity of ancient terror. Alex and Clara clung to each other, their hearts pounding in unison with the eerie whispers that filled the air. The cold seeped deeper into their bones, a chilling reminder of the supernatural forces at play, forces that seemed intent on ensnaring them in a web of forgotten histories and dark rituals. The vibrations of the cabin grew more intense, the walls themselves seeming to pulse with life, or something like it. The mirror's vibrating crescendo reached a peak, then, with a sound like the breaking of the world, it shattered, sending shards of glass flying through the air like glittering rain. From the broken mirror emerged a figure, cloaked and hooded, its face obscured by the darkness. The figure stepped forward, the cabin floor creaking ominously under its weight. Alex and Clara backed away, their eyes wide with terror, but the figure raised a hand, motioning for silence. "Do not fear," it spoke, its voice echoing not just in the cabin but in their minds, "for you have been chosen not for sacrifice, but for guardianship." Confused and still fearful, Alex found his voice. Guardianship? Of what? The land, the secrets, the ancient rites that bind the spirits here, the figure replied, its voice a whisper of leaves. "You have seen through the mirror the truths buried deep. You carry them now, a part of you just as you shall become a part of this place." "But we don't belong here," Clara protested, her voice trembling. "We didn't mean to come here. It was an accident." "No arrival here is accidental," the figure intoned. "The forest calls to those it needs, those who can protect its secrets. You came seeking stories, but now you are part of the story, a living piece of this land's lore." The cabin began to settle, the trembling of the earth ceasing, and the air warming slightly as if acknowledging the figure's words. The darkness seemed to lessen, a soft light filtering in through the cracks in the walls. "You will not be prisoners," the figure continued, "but guardians. Free to explore, to live within these woods. You will protect this place, and in return, it will protect you. You will see what others cannot, the spirits of the forest, the truths hidden in shadow." "And if we refuse?" Alex asked, his journalistic skepticism battling his growing realization of the surreal truth. "There is no refusal in the face of destiny," the figure said simply. "Look around you. The spirits have already accepted you. You felt their call. You answered." Looking around, Alex and Clara saw the shadows moving, not threateningly, but almost welcomingly. The whispers in the air turned to a soothing murmur, like a lullaby meant to calm their frightened hearts. With a heavy sense of inevitability settling over them, they understood. They were part of something older than either of them could have imagined, something that transcended simple ghost stories and entered the realm of ancient guardianship. The figure stepped back, merging with the shadows that now seemed less ominous. Protect this place, as it will protect you. Your life here begins now, under the watchful eyes of those who walked these paths before you. As the figure disappeared, the cabin felt suddenly peaceful, the oppressive atmosphere lifting. Alex and Clara looked at each other, their future uncertain but irrevocably changed. They stepped outside, the forest greeting them not with fear, but with a whispering welcome. The sun began to rise, casting light through the trees, the rays like fingers brushing the forest floor. They walked together, their steps no longer hesitant, but with a purpose they hadn't possessed before. They were guardians now, bound to the heart of the forest, to its spirits and secrets. And as they walked, the forest whispered its ancient stories, stories they would now protect and add to, in the endless weave of the wood's shadowed lore. Asterisk, asterisk, at the end, asterisk, asterisk.